All right, the Orlando Sentinel has an article out today that I want to go over real quick. Details that they say have changed and it's caused inconsistencies in Georgia's story. So I want to hammer these out real quick because I think we've already resolved these issues, but I just want to go over it real quick because I see other people making videos about them. So let's start with the first one. It says where the confrontation happened. George said the bushes the first night, and then the next day he was pointing out and saying I was somewhere around this sidewalk and I saw him coming up. So so they're saying that that is an inconsistency, which really is irrelevant to the case. Who cares if he came out of the bushes, if he came out of off the sidewalk, and why would George lie about that? He came out of the bushes, he came off the sidewalk. I mean, that doesn't it's not a case breaker, it's not a case maker, it's nothing. It's what we call fluff in the legal terms. It's just sometimes when people are trying to make a case and they have no evidence, they will they will reach out and try to grab any little thing, any little tidbits. So they're trying to find any inconsistency they can find or any little hole in his memory. And we already know the guy has memory issues, and he's on prescription drugs that also would cause memory issues. But whether he would remember, you know, and in fact, when he said it that night, he came out of the bushes. It was like, he came out of nowhere. He came out of, it could have been the bushes. It could have been no, he couldn't see really where he came from, but he did know that by the time he noticed him, really noticed him, he was right there, close to him. He couldn't possibly tell that he was coming from the bushes because they're pretty far off. But he maybe he was assuming he come out of those bushes. I mean, it must have been. Where else did he come from? I disagree with him. I think that he came from his house. That's my opinion, and I've got evidence to prove it. Anyhow, okay, let's go to the next part. What Trayvon said, and in this case, that night he said, "What the f? What the f is your problem, homie?" And then the next day he said, "You got a problem?" And then during a reenactment he said, "Yo, you got a problem?" So there are three different statements here that he's saying. He's got yo, you got a problem, you got a problem. Those two are the same. Yo, you got a problem, you got a problem. Who cares? Same thing. And the first one was, um, what the f is your problem, homie? So I don't see how either any of that matters. It certainly doesn't make the case or break the case. Let's say he lied about it. Let's say the first time he said, "What the f is your problem, homie?" because he was trying to make it sound like Trayvon was tougher than he was acting. Who knows? Or maybe the second time when he said, "You got a problem," he was lightening it up a little bit. Or maybe he just couldn't really remember specifically, especially the second day, what exactly was said because there's so many specific things to remember from the very beginning when he first sees Trayvon through the area over by the clubhouse, um, where when he pulls out of the clubhouse and goes around and parks and has his headlights over there, when he gets out of his car and he goes down to the T, and whether he goes across the T or turns down the T, I don't know, but I do know that Trayvon had more than enough time to get away and make it home, and that I do know that Trayvon came back to talk to him because Trayvon spoke first. That's absolute evidence, and the fact that Trayvon's so far away. Okay, so again, this part about what Trayvon said doesn't matter. His girlfriend said, "What you calling? What you following me for?" That's because the investigator was trying to get him to say that he was trying to get everybody to believe that Trayvon knew George was following him. And we know that Trayvon never did know that. He couldn't have known that until after he came back up the sidewalk and saw him walking. But we know that George was in his truck, and Trayvon ran and turned that corner where he could no longer see George. So once he turned that corner, he was out of George's view. George was out of his view. That means that he couldn't have known that that George got out of his truck. So that was one of the big things that he really tried to get. The investigator wanted to prove that Trayvon was running in fear, that George was following him and hunting him down like a dog. He could never get that. And I also, if you want to go back and listen to my I went over everything that Dee Dee said, and I really tore it apart. And I caught her in a ton of lies, mostly prosecution lies that obviously the prosecution was trying to lead her and to get her to say certain things, and it's just hilarious. I mean, it's the craziest thing. So if she said, "What you following me for?" and he actually said that, fine. It makes no difference. Maybe George was wrong. Maybe she was wrong. It doesn't matter. What Trayvon said is not a deal breaker in this case. It makes no difference. That's why they usually don't care too much. If you're in a trial and they're talking about what one guy said or the other guy said, and there's a little discrepancy on the wording, it's just not even an issue. Not even an issue. Nobody even wants to talk about that because there's no case there. Nothing happened. Okay, the next part was the dispatcher asked him to find Trayvon. And of course they're saying that never happened. Trayvon, they never asked him to look for Trayvon. But that's not true. If you look at my video and the map video where I'm talking about the layout, and George is there and Trayvon is behind him, and now he's walking up to him, and George is really concerned, and he says, "Get an officer here quickly." And he said, "Okay, he's on his way. If the guy does anything else, tell us." That was where he said that's where George took it to mean keep an eye on this guy. He said, if he does anything else, tell us. Well, how can he tell you if Trayvon walks around the corner and goes out of view? How can he possibly tell the dispatcher what he's doing? He can't. So that's when you hear him back out. He puts it in drive. He goes around the corner. He doesn't see Trayvon. You can tell he can't see Trayvon because he's talking to the dispatcher. And then the next time, then suddenly he does see the Trayvon. He's like, that he was there. And then suddenly he says he runs. And then you can hear the car door, and he tells him where he runs from. And so we know all that stuff. So, the dispatcher did, in a roundabout way, tell him to keep an eye on Trayvon. In the same way, a lot of people say, well, he didn't say that. Well, you could also, all these same people say that the dispatch told him, do not follow Trayvon. Go back and get in your car. This is what they heard. This is in their head. These people that hate George, this is what they hear from the dispatch. Go back to your car right now. Or some people believe that he's still in his car, and they're saying that the dispatcher said, don't get out of your car. See, they misheard it. That's not what he said. He said, we don't need you to do that. So you can twist it either way. Most of us understand what that means. Most of us understand that means that the dispatcher was saying, we don't need you to put yourself in that kind of danger. Don't follow him. You're going to get hurt. Not that it's illegal. There was no crime to follow in Trayvon. It's just dangerous. And the cops don't want you to put your life in danger. So, of course, their article says the review of Zimmerman's recorded call with dispatch shows there was no such request. And like I said, I just told you where it is, so you can go back and find that on the video if you like. All right, and then the next section is, did he follow Trayvon? And of course, we heard the dispatch saying, are you following him? He says, yeah. Okay, we don't need you to do that. George says, okay. But after the shooting, he offered a different reason for getting out of his truck. Remember? He said he was just going to get an address. Well, listen to the tape, and you can tell that as he gets out of the truck, he's saying he's running. And remember, at this point, he he is on a mission to keep an eye, based on what the dispatch told him, to keep an eye on this guy. So he gets out of his car and he heads over there towards the T to see where he went, because remember, as he's opening the car door, you hear the car door click open. The dispatch says, "Which way did he go?" He said he's heading towards the back entrance. That's south, down that sidewalk. The only way to get to that back entrance from where Trayvon was south, down that sidewalk. So he said he's running. Which way is he going? So he's running. And so when he said he's running, Trayvon is already turned on that T and he's going down that thing. So now he's running, click, click, click. The timer's going off. Trayvon's making leeway. And George is telling him where he's going, to the back entrance. So all that time that they're talking, Trayvon's running. And George is opening the door. And then you can hear him puffing because he's moving down there to get an eyeball on him from around the corner. So they asked, were you following him? No, he wasn't really following him. And this is what they asked him later on when they walked around. The guy was the detective was trying to suggest that he was following. He said not in that same meaning. He said, no, I was just trying to keep an eye on him. I was just going in the same direction as he was going. And the dispatcher said, that's following. Yeah, I guess so. So when you walk down the sidewalk in New York City, you're following 10 million people. It's ridiculous. Really, think about it. If you're walking behind somebody that's moving in a certain direction, then you're following them. Yeah, I guess you could say that. It's stupid. Anyhow, Sereno challenged him farther and said, how do you not know the 3 streets in your neighborhood where you have been for 3 years? And then they leave it at that. They don't see that. Oh, here it is. Zimmerman replied that he had a bad memory and attention deficit disorder. So is that a lie? Look how they put this ad in here. It really comes across like you get this answer, then you get this ad, and all this looks like it's all together in the ad, and then you go down to the next portion. You'd kind of skip over that. You wouldn't notice that last sentence there, would you? Kind of sneaky, huh? Okay, now the other inconsistencies, and remember, I just killed all the other ones. I've killed them all. These are all worthless. They have nothing to do with the case. It certainly wouldn't prove anything. And I've already proven that George did not follow Trayvon just by my map video, so you can go take a look at that if you don't believe it. You can see that there is no way George followed Trayvon. All right. The last inconsistencies, there's 3 of them here, and I believe these all got trashed on one of my videos, but let me look and see. He said during the struggle, Trayvon covered his mouth and nose with his hands, but in the recorded 911 call from one of the neighbors, they could hear the screaming, but not the muffled cries. So this was the other thing. So Trayvon is beating the crap out of him. He's screaming in pain and crying out for help. And now they want to know, to prove that he's a murderer, why it is that they couldn't hear the muffled sounds. If George had never said anything about being smothered, there would be nothing. And the fact that he said it, and the fact that they can't find any evidence of the smothering, doesn't change anything in the case. Who cares? Who cares about the smothering? It's ridiculous. But yes, we do have an opportunity to hear the smothered cries. In fact, I believe it was witness number 5 that said that it was a funny noise. It wasn't a regular noise that she heard. But who cares? Really, who cares? Put your hand over your mouth and see if you can't make a screaming noise. See if you can't fight off somebody that's holding your mouth and try to get out a scream. It's ridiculous. This This is where they're grasping at straws. All right. Zimmerman had injuries, but not ones that matched the severity of the attack he described, according to Serino. Well, remember, Serino just got canned. Well, he's not working in this case anymore. He's full of shit. I mean, you've got a broken nose, you've got black eyes, you got blood that is all over his face. It's pouring into his eyes. He can't even see because he's looking through blood. And this investigator suggesting that the injuries don't match the severity that he described. You know, this guy's crazy. He says if Trayvon had been banging Zimmerman's head on the sidewalk, he should have had skull fractures, not just cuts. So what is he suggesting here? Is he suggesting that maybe George banged his head somewhere, maybe on a wall or something, minutes before this, or seconds before this, because he was planning on shooting Trayvon, and that was the plan, that he was going to prove, he was going to say that he knew that Trayvon didn't have a gun. So let's see, how can I do this? I should have brought my extra gun so that I could throw it on him. Every good wannabe cop has a gun that he picked up somewhere that he can just throw on the suspect and say, hey, the guy had a gun, I shot him. End of story. That's what the cops do, right? But no, this guy wasn't that smart. But he came up with even a better plan. I don't need to go out and buy a gun to throw out there. Oh, I can do even better than that. I'll just bang my head on the wall just seconds before I kill this kid. That'll do it. And, of course, now that I've got my head banged, I got to somehow or another get this kid to get on top of me. And then I have to scream like I'm really in serious pain, like somebody's trying to kill me. And then I need to get some witnesses to come out because, I need, like John, he needs to come over here and see me getting beat up by this guy, and I need to be crying out for help. Because when I pull out this gun and shoot him, I need to have a good alibi, a nice story. Sounds reasonable to me, doesn't it, you? Okay. He said the next one is, there were no defensive wounds on Zimmerman's hands, and just one small scrape on a finger of Trayvon's left hand. Had little evidence of a life-death struggle. Well, what exactly would be defensive wounds on somebody's hands that's when you're laying on the ground and somebody's swinging their fists at you with all of their might? What kind of, lay yourself on your back and imagine this. Get your hands out. This guy's swinging at you. You're trying to block his blows with your hands, Some of them are getting through. You might stop a couple, but, it's obviously getting through because he's got black eyes. He's got abrasions on his face and around his temple. So, this Serino guy that's now no longer on the case suggested that was of little no evidence of a life-death struggle. I disagree. You got blood in your eyes, your nose is broken, and you've got gash marks on your head. I don't know. Maybe we should get Mr. Serino in that position and get somebody about the size of Trayvon on top of him and tell him to put the fear of God in him. See what happens. I don't know. Anyway, Serino's gone. And it's interesting that in this article, and that's the end of this article here, that you don't see any information on Serino. Wouldn't you think that, like at the very end here, they would say, oh, by the way, Mr. Serino is no longer part of the investigation, and maybe even give some specifics about why he's no longer in the investigation. But they're not interested. So what can I say? Anyhow, take a look at the article if you want. It's Orlando Sentinel, today, Thursday, June 28th, 2012, and I'm using this article, fair use. Thank you.